On this edition of Independent Sources, Non-Citizen Suffrage, New York's City Council considers legislation to allow non-citizens to vote in local elections.
The Closing Doors, a haunting story, inspires a film director to use his craft to talk about a disorder that affects millions of children.
And the Chinese Quintessence, how a popular Chinese board game helps seniors across cultures deal with dementia.
Welcome to Independent Sources. I'm Viano Ravinka.
And I'm Gary Pierre. New York City may soon make history as the City Council considers a bill that would give non-citizens the right to vote in local elections.
So far, the usually pro-immigrant mayor, Michael Bloomberg, has spoken out against the proposal, saying that the ability to vote is the most important right afforded citizens and should remain that way.
Zyphus LeBrun spoke with one of the bill's co-authors, City Councilman Daniel Drum and Jerry Vatamala of the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. They talk about the scope of the bill and whether or not it can become a reality.
Thank you, Councilman Daniel Drum, for being with us in studio today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And Jerry Vatamala, thank you for joining us via telephone.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right. So, Councilman, let's just start with you. In a nutshell, could you explain to the audience what exactly does this legislation entail right now?
Sure. Well, right now, 1 in 5 New Yorkers cannot vote in municipal elections. I'm a believer in democracy, and I believe that everyone should have the right to participate, particularly in municipal elections. What my legislation would do would be to allow those who are legally present in the United States to vote in municipal elections, for mayor, for controller, for public advocate, and for members of the city council. And I believe that that would enfranchise people in communities like the community that I represent, which is 68% immigrant, Jackson Heights, Elmhurst, and would get people more civically engaged in what goes on in the community. And that was my idea in putting forth this legislation.
All right, so let's just talk a little bit about, let's try to dispel some misconceptions here, because one thing is this, does this bill look at, or rather, is this bill making way for people who are here, let's say, illegally, or do these people need to be documented?
Right, they do need to be documented. This is for people who perhaps have a green card, for people who are here on student visas, who are here longer than 6 months, those who may be asylum seekers. It's for people like that who are here for a significant period of time and who want to participate in our society.
Now, there are 2 other states that have already instituted some similar legislation, in Maryland and Massachusetts. Now, have you guys taken anything from either of those states as regards to this current legislation?
Yes, it's a similar idea. And in fact, somebody from Maryland came to the hearing that I had about a week and a half ago in the City Council on this legislation. And he said that there was no problem implementing this in Maryland at all, that people just assumed in the communities that allow for immigrant voting that people live there and they want to participate, and it went smoothly. Now in Massachusetts, there is a challenge to the law, and we're waiting to see the outcome of that. So, but in Chicago, for example, people can vote for the local school board, not for the overall school board, but for the local school board. Doesn't matter if you're documented or undocumented. My legislation will only deal, in this case, in New York City, with those who are documented.
Okay. Now, Jerry, we're going to turn the conversation to you a little bit. Let's talk about the legality of this bill. In your estimation, will there be any kind of question as to the legality of this bill?
Well, there's not much of a question in my mind, and in the mind of a few other legal organizations that have taken a look at this issue. We know that the mayor's office believes that there might be a constitutional problem here. But in our analysis, at ALDEP's analysis, and I know the Brennan Center did an analysis as well, it appears that under the home rule authority given to local jurisdictions and under a provision of the local election law, New York City would have the authority to implement this law without any state action.
I see. So that means the state would not be able to veto this bill if it is passed locally.
Well, I don't know if they were to pass some kind of state legislation, that might be another issue. but New York City has the authority to pass this law without any state action at all. And there's nothing in the state constitution or in state election law that prevents non-citizens from voting in local elections.
Now, back to you, Councilman. Tell us where is the bill right now?
Sure. I just want to add one thing to what Jerry said also. There's precedent for this because up until 2001, documented and undocumented parents of children in the New York City public schools were allowed to vote. And that was done by legislative action. So we believe, based on that also, that precedent has said that people can vote in the election. So the bill stands right now. It's still in committee. We're hoping to get a vote on it, to get it out of committee. Then it would have to go to the floor of the full council. And then from there, we'd have to see if the mayor would veto it or sign it. But as it stands right now, we have enough votes to override the veto. We have 34 votes.
Right, and now the one report actually described this as a veto-proof majority.
Correct.
I mean, so looking ahead, is it looking positive?
Looking very, very positive. Matter of fact, when I got this bill, we had 8 co-sponsors in 2010. Now we have the 34, and actually I think I have other people who are not sponsors, but who would vote in favor of the legislation if it got to the floor of the council. So I'm optimistic, and I'm optimistic that we can get this to the floor of the council by the end of the year.
So why now? I mean, you know, we've talked a lot about the bill and the legality of the bill. So, but why now, particularly now?
Well, I think a lot of people are interested in comprehensive immigration reform. That's one thing that has been on the people's minds for a good long period of time now. But for those of us who are involved on the chair of the Immigration Committee in the City Council with immigrant rights issues, this is a very, very important issue. You know, there's no right stronger than the right to vote in elections. And I think that if we were to pass this legislation, or I should say when we pass this legislation, we are going to empower communities like mine so that elected officials who run for citywide office will never again be able to ignore communities like mine that are mostly immigrant communities.
And that was actually one of the things that I wanted to ask is like, how could this bill possibly change the way local elections are run in New York City?
Well, it would change the dynamics of elections in a huge, huge way. We're talking about adding approximately 800,000 new voters to the list, and that would make a huge difference in the way that campaigns are run, in the way that people participate, and I believe even on the issues. I think we would have a more progressive base of supporters, and a lot of the issues that I talk about constantly that are important to the immigrant community would be issues that would be brought to the forefront.
Now, Jerry, I want to bring you back in on this one, and we spoke earlier a little bit about legal precedent. In the case of what's happening in New York City, if this does go through and other states see what New York City is doing, other states that have high immigrant populations, what kind of precedent does this set here for other states in the United States?
Well, I think it would sort of set the precedent of allowing non-citizen voting in jurisdictions that have a similar dynamic with the state constitution that the New York City Charter has and the New York City government has within the New York State Constitution. Our Constitution has, as I mentioned, a home rule provision, which gives great deference to local jurisdictions, with the thinking being local jurisdictions know how to run their local elections best, and to the extent that other states have similar provisions in their constitutions, I think it gives a great precedent, a great example to the rest of the country to show what's possible.
Councilman Drum, we talked a little bit about how it could change the dynamics of how elections are run. I mean, are there any concerns on the ground as regards to that? This idea of perhaps gerrymandering, the questions that may kind of arise coming out of this.
Well, there are some concerns. There are some concerns which I think were legitimate that were brought to the attention of us at the hearing. Would the Board of Elections be able to properly implement this? And, we've had other problems with the Board of Elections, et cetera, so forth and so on. The Board of Elections called this an unfunded mandate, which I find also to be a very funny use of that word. Democracy costs money, but it's really worth it to invest in democracy. And so I think those issues, how we get the funding to be able to do this and how we make sure that the Board of Elections is on top of it, are issues of concern to us. But we can fix that as we move forward. And in fact, if we pass this legislation by the end of the year, the next municipal election won't occur until about 4 years after that. So there'll be time to also work out these kinks in terms of the Board of Elections.
Okay, Councilman Daniel Drum, thank you for being with us. And Jerry Vatamala, thank you for joining us via telephone. Really appreciate it, gentlemen.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Still to come, a film about eloping, and it's not what you might think.
Before that, Sarah Pizon has some other news.
Thanks, Vianara. Here's a look at some headlines from the ethnic and community media. Chinese immigrants are shipping baby formula back home. The World Journal reports that concerns over the safety of baby formula has parents buying imported formula from stores in New York City's Chinatown. The concerns stem from a 2008 incident that led to the death of 6 babies. This phenomenon has led to more strict restrictions from Chinese officials. The import tax on powdered baby formula is now 10% compared to 5% last year, and the after-tax price has increased to more than $30 per kilogram. A courier agency on East Broadway says the Chinese have lost faith in food made in China, so they will continue to send baby formula back home, no matter how expensive it gets. From the Forward, the Rabbinical Council of America is rejecting the recent graduation of 3 women from Riverdale's Yeshivat Maharat, a school that trains Orthodox Jewish women to become spiritual leaders. The Orthodox organization opposing the graduation says it's a violation of tradition. Sarah Hurwitz, the school's dean, says the women will be ordained as clergy but will not hold the title of rabbi. Instead, they will be conferred with the title of Maharat. It means leader in Jewish law, spirituality, and Torah. Despite the friction, the new graduates are being embraced in other parts of the Orthodox community, in synagogues in Montreal and Washington, D.C. From French Morning, the new bike-sharing program scheduled to put 6,000 bikes and 330 stations in New York City by the end of the month has come under fire. NI-City bike outcriers say the new stations will generate trash and loud environments. Some Manhattan residents say the concept is dangerous as New York drivers are reckless. And Brooklyn residents say the concept is discriminatory against obese citizens as the bikes can only support 260 pounds. The city of New York has refused to comment on these allegations. The city bike service is set to launch by May 27th. 6 months after Hurricane Sandy, affected residents in Far Rockaway, Queens are learning how to start their own businesses through a program of community-funded cooperatives. El Diario La Prensa reports that the Occupy Sandy initiative was launched to create new jobs for some of these victims who are now unemployed. Participants learned skills ranging from restaurant management to construction. More than 40 people, mostly from Central America, are involved in the 17-week program. And finally, from city limits, a state Supreme Court judge could issue several rulings on a legal challenge to open a Fresh Direct in Port Morris in the next few weeks. The suit filed in March charges that the project negatively impacts the environment. Fresh Direct has vowed that the 11th acre headquarters will create 1,000 new jobs. However, Fresh Direct is only relocating its Queens location to the Bronx, and residents are concerned about how many real new jobs this will create. Bronxites also worry about the rise of commercial trucks in their neighborhood. Those were just a few stories from the ethnic and community media. Independent sources will be back after this.
You realize that 49 million Americans struggle with hunger? That's 1 out of every 6 Americans.
These people are around us every day. They're our friends, they're our coworkers, their kids go to school with our kids.
Sometimes we're not even aware that they're struggling. This problem is closer than you think. So is the solution.
Play a role in ending hunger. Visit feedingamerica.org/hunger and find your local food bank.
Stand Clear of the Closing Doors is an independent film that focuses on the issue of autism. 1 in 88 children in the United States alone has to cope with some form of this disorder.
I spoke with the film's director, Sam Fleischner, about what inspired the project and what he hopes will come out of it. Sam, the idea for your film, Stand Clear of the Closing Doors, came from an article that you read in 2009, an article that you say haunted you. What was that story about?
Well, that was kind of a jumping off point. I read an article about a kid with autism who ran away on the subway for 10 days. And I guess what haunted me about it was just that somebody, a kid could go unnoticed for that long in such a public place. And so I just thought a lot about what the family must have been going through during that period and what the kid must have seen. And then as I did more research, I realized that this is actually a fairly common problem of kids on the autism spectrum running away from home. They call it eloping, and it happens a lot. It's happened a bunch on the subway and in other places around the world as well.
And that inspired you to do this film. What's the story behind your film?
So my film is about an undocumented Mexican family that lives in Rockaway Beach, Queens, right on the ocean. And they have a son in the 8th grade who is just having a hard time and follows this kind of phantom dragon figure. It's a symbol of the Ouroboros dragon, the dragon that eats its own tail, which he's been drawing, and then all of a sudden he sees this jacket with a patch on it, so it kind of leads him onto the train away from home, and that's the beginning of his odyssey.
You said that this is a boy in an illegal Mexican immigrant family.
Yeah.
Why was it important for you to have this type of family in the story?
I've always been fascinated by that history. I mean, the history of immigrants in the U.S. in general. I mean, this country in a lot of ways is all about people coming here and to start lives from the beginning, or, you know, after Columbus. And it's just an important perspective, I think, to look at, and the struggle of getting to this country right now in 2013 and making a life is something that I think is very noble and needs to be considered, and not so many stories are told from that perspective. So it was just interesting to me, and it also, I mean, from a dramatic standpoint, for the narrative, if the family's undocumented and they have a child missing, then their relationship to the authorities becomes more contentious, because they don't feel like the system is there to support them, or they don't want to compromise their standing by, you know, reaching out to the police.
You were also quoted in the local media saying that it's good to tell stories that aren't about white people. What did you mean by that?
Well, you know, there's, I think, I don't know what the number is, but I would say 99% of the movies made in this country are like by and about white people, and by no means is that representative of the country we're living in. So I don't know, that's why I guess I was interested in like telling a story about a family that's not white.
Now, 3 weeks into filming, Hurricane Sandy hit, and with the film being based in Rockaway, how did Sandy impacted shooting and also the story of the film, if in any ways it did?
Yeah, I mean, the storm impacted both things. We had to stop filming. The subway was shut down. We were actually just beginning to film that part of the movie, and our main location was, you know, out of order. So, and not only that, our main location in Rockaway was also completely leveled and covered in sand, and my house was more or less destroyed, and so it was a really intense time, and we needed to reset. And you know, there was a number of shots that I needed for the end of my movie, which I just could not get the way they were scripted. So rewriting the end was part practical, and then also part just good for the narrative, and having this storm come at the end of the film thematically worked, and it made sense given the themes that I was looking to explore in the film. Like, better than anything I could have written, you know, it really summed up what I was going for, especially going back to the dragon symbol, and this idea that creation comes from destruction, and it's this ongoing cycle. So,
I'd like to move on to the Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah.
How did that go?
Kickstarter was a good, important tool for this movie. This is like an inherently not commercial film, so raising money was very difficult. And I didn't want to do a Kickstarter campaign at first, just because asking people for money is like such an unpleasant thing to do, and oftentimes you're dependent on your friends and family, and it's like it kind of works off of guilt. You know, you have to like guilt people into giving you money, and that made me really uncomfortable. But I realized, you know, that it's less about the people I know than it's the people I don't know, and that a tool like Kickstarter can actually extend your network way more than any other, more than anything really. So it worked out, and it like gave us just the amount of extra money we needed to make the film. So.
And you made the film in only a few months with an amazing team, and the film had its debut at Tribeca Film Festival.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about what it meant for you to have the film within this festival, and also the response to it so far.
Yeah, well, we really worked hard to get the movie done in time. There was a very small window between when we finished shooting and when we finished editing. Tribeca was interested in the film early on, and they invited it based on a rough cut. So it was literally, you know, 3 days before the premiere that I like finished the movie, and I could have worked probably another month or two on the edit, but we really wanted to have it done in time for Tribeca because, you know, if we hadn't played it in New York, we had premiered it in another place, and nobody who worked on it could have been a part of it, and and it's a New York story as well, so it just made a lot of sense to make it happen for Tribeca, and I'm glad we did.
And what's the response to it?
The response was really positive. I mean, the amount of parents with kids on the autism spectrum and special ed teachers that have come up and thanked me has been really rewarding. I hope that this can be a meaningful point of view for people, and yeah, we'll see what happens from here. We'll hopefully it'll get out there.
Sam Fleischner, director of Stand Clear of the Closing Doors, thank you for being in studio with us today.
Thanks for having me.
When we come back, a game with origins in the Far East helps some with roots in the Middle East.
And finally, what comes to mind when you think of the quintessential Chinese game? If you ask a native Chinese, odds are Mahjong may be the answer.
Mahjong originated in ancient China and is played in almost every Chinese household. Here in New York, Chinese are not the only ones who enjoy the game. Meng Lang Wang has the story.
Sao Yong is 95, and the Li Mei is 81. What are they so dedicated to? The answer is Mahjong. This is a Mahjong room inside the Project Open Door Senior Center in Chinatown. The 6 tables are always occupied. Many of the elderly can sit and play the game for an entire day. For some, Mahjong is a daily exercise.
From 8 o'clock to 5, I've been in the center, otherwise at home.
Mahjong is commonly seen as a quintessential aspect of Chinese culture, along with the Beijing opera, calligraphy, and martial arts. It is the #1 social game for Chinese, especially to businessmen, who close many deals at Mahjong tables. The game is also thought as a good way to avoid dementia.
医学发觉呢，假如你能够猜麻将呢，你就可以没有吃癌症。但是我现在告诉你一个秘诀，就是说，你怕吃癌症吗？不要紧，来人类中心猜麻将就没有吃癌症了。
There are several stories about when Mahjong was first created. Some people claim that it was invented by the Confucius, while some others said that it was created only 150 years ago. In either case, Mahjong is a complex game that requires skill, strategy, and a certain degree of chance. But the basics are quite simple. First, tiles are shuffled and then stacked in 4 two-tier walls. The dealer then rolls the dice that decides where to pick up the tiles and begin the game. Everyone starts with a 13-tile hand except the dealer, who has 14. Then continue to throw and collect tiles in a counterclockwise order. In order to win, a player needs to get the right combinations that sometimes can be 4 three-tile combinations plus a pair.
2 I can win, 2, 5 I can win, 8 I can win. You see, you're very funny, but he is 6.
Here in Chinatown, Mahjong sets are offered at almost every senior center and association. What you may not know is that there's another group living in the city that also play the game on a regular basis.
Every Monday, close to 100 Jewish women gather at this Upper East Side restaurant. They don't come here just to chill and have afternoon teas. They come here to play Mahjong.
I go weeks and weeks without winning, but I never go any time at all without having a good time. So that's all that matters. I enjoy the game. 5 crack.
About 80% of the players here were taught by one Mahjong master, Linda Feinstein, who is also the founder of the Manhattan Mahjong Club.
I think women need this, something for themselves, because they're working so hard. And so this is like their time. They get together, they can play a game, it's fun. Everybody, has a good time.
Mahjong was imported to the U.S. in the 1920s by a Jewish merchant and soon became popular among the entire Jewish community. Feinstein learned how to play Mahjong when she was 9 years old, and now she's been playing for over half a century and has taught over 4,000 students.
Because you can call the 1 dot the minute it goes out.
It's very traditional. Like I would say that 50% of the Jewish women in the city probably have a Mahjong set in their closet. Everybody remembers the sound of the tiles and, the cracks, the bams, the dots. It's a tradition.
The Mahjong these women are playing is quite different from the one played by Chinese seniors. The symbols and the characters stay the same, but the Jewish Mahjong adds extra tiles, such as jokers. Unlike the Chinese, they play with racks and always have a guidebook on the table that helps them look up the combinations.
It's a game that's very learnable. It's where you meet other women who love to play the game. It's very social, and it's a great way to make friends.
I thought it was an opportunity for some socialization without having to travel any distance or go to a large club and deal with that. And I thought, let me try the tiles in Mahjong. And I'm able to do that, I think.
Yes, you're doing very nicely. And she won 2 games.
For independent sources, I'm Menling Huang.
That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned.
Till next time, be independent-minded.